Hey ladies, you blew me away this week with your responses to the Acts 27 reading challenge that I called it the Anchor Yourself to Truth challenge. You blew me away. I loved going through the Facebook page and seeing all of the different things that you were posting and getting a sneak peek into what God has been teaching you in the last few weeks of our study together. So thank you for that. It was such a privilege and a joy for me. You know, it really wasn't about the doodling. It wasn't about the drawing or what a wonderful artist you are or you might not be. It really was just about giving you, some new tools to be able to help you remember what you're studying and internalize what you're studying in God's Word and just helping to give you a fresh perspective. You know, God's Word is alive and it is active, and He promises to speak to us in His Word if we will just sit still long enough and listen. So this week, as you enter into chapter 4 of 1 Timothy, I want you to take that same spirit of adventure and that same spirit of discovery with you as you read. Because Paul is going to give us some very practical ways that we can make sure we keep Christ the captain of our ship and to keep us from shipwreck. This summer, our family has gotten addicted to this one TV show called Alone. And we've sort of began binge watching the different series in this TV show, and it's just a nature reality show about these men who get dropped off in the Canadian wilderness, and they have 10 survival items that have been pre-approved, pre-selected that they can take with them, and the producers just literally drop them in each miles apart from each other in the wilderness with just their few items, with a GPS phone that they can call and tap out, and then a camera, just to document their experience and nothing else. They are alone and isolated, like castaways on an island. There's no producers or crewmen following them around. There's no hidden resort, just right around the corner. They are utterly isolated and alone. And this TV show has been so fascinating for our family. We have some outdoorsmen in our family, so they love the nature, but excuse me, more than that, it has been an absolute fascinating story about human nature. And more than wrestling with the wilderness, these men have discovered that they are in truth, wrestling with themselves. One individual said it best. He said, worse than the prey, worse than the mountain lions or the bears that are, constantly surrounding us and stalking us during the day and coming to sniff around our shelters at night. He says, worse than the prey is the solitude. Because when these men are left to themselves, they realize that there is nothing left to distract them from their thoughts, from that inner audio that runs in their head, from the accusations of their conscience and the guilt over past choices. And we watched on camera as grown men began to drop like flies. Listen, in season 2, one man only made it 4 hours. 4 hours before he couldn't take his thoughts anymore. There's no phones, there's no Facebook, there's no email, there's no books, there's no movies. There's no kids, there's no food, obviously there's no retail therapy. All of those things that we use to distract ourselves from dealing with our conscience. The man who actually won season 1, and listen ladies, this is a spoiler alert, so I'm sorry if I'm ruining this for you, but the man who won season 1 was actually the oldest contestant. He was not trained, in military or anything like that to survive those experiences. But what he said helped him the most was learning to live at peace with himself. And he said, look, when you're out in the wilderness with no distractions, all of those past mistakes and all those past choices come to the fore. And you have to learn to face them head on. He said, there is no suppressing them. Ladies, in our life, Paul will tell us in chapter 4 that our conscience will condemn us for those things that we have done wrong. And we are tasked with keeping our conscience clean after the work of Christ on the cross. And we have to deal with our conscience. If we ignore it, if we suppress it, if we try to appease it or try to distract ourselves from dealing with it, we will end up pushing ourselves farther from Christ. We will be isolated, we will be alone, we will be utterly shipwrecked, and our heart will become so hard that we will no longer be able to hear or listen or yield to the voice of God in our life. Ladies, we have to learn to deal with our conscience. To not do so is to leave ourselves as a castaway on an island. And so as you read chapter 4, I want to post this question for you to consider. I want you to think about the ways in which you intentionally strive for godliness. In chapter 3, we looked at how we make Christ the captain of our soul. And that does not, in chapter 4, Paul follows up, entail completely giving up. There are some things, practical steps that you and I must take in order to strive to pursue godliness. Ladies, we don't want to be castaways. We don't want to be shipwrecked. Think about this week as you read, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it later. But how do you intentionally and actively strive for godliness? Ladies, happy reading, and I'll see you later this week.